Now let's take a look at noise based extrusion as well as dual meshes. And as always, let's create a geometry node and let's dive inside, and in here let's add a grid, and that is our beautiful grid, lovely grid. Let's bring up the parameter of this grid and let me increase its rows and column. Maybe let's increase this to 150 by 150 so that I have a lot more divisions. And now let's generate a noise map of our in here onto our grid, and for that I'm going to use an attribute warp. So let's add an attribute warp and let's connect this grid into the attribute warp. And I will not go too much detail into the attribute warps as well as attributes, as I have intensively covered these topics in my other basics Houdini course. If you are interested in learning more, you can check out these courses. And for this I'm going to just add a noise. Okay, I expect you to have the knowledge of how the attribute warps and noise work. Okay, so let's set the display flag onto the attribute warp, and let's dive inside the attribute warp. And now we are in the Vex context, and in here let's right click and in here type noise. If we type noise, we have all of these different types of noise, and for this example I'm going to use an anti-alias noise. So let's add this, and it needs the position for sampling the noise. So let's connect the position to our currently processed point position of our grid, and it will output the noise. So let's output the noise into CD, which means the color diffuse, and that is our noise map. And let's expose all of these parameters onto our geometry level so that we can easily access all of these noise parameter. Okay, and for that let's right click on this AA noise and let's go into the Vex warp option, and let's create an A input parameters, and that will expose all of these parameters onto our geometry level. And now if I bring up the parameter of attribute warp, and here I have these noise parameter at the geometry level. Okay, now I can easily adjust my frequency, offset as well as amplitude. Okay, now we have the noise type which is set to Perlin. Okay, let's keep this at Perlin. Let me adjust the frequency. Let's lower down frequency to create a high frequency noise, or maybe let's change this to simplex noise, and let's increase the amplitude to add a bit more contrast in our noise. Okay, and I think that is fine. And now if I middle mouse button, here as you can see we have a CD point attribute color diffuse, and to actually use this noise attribute to drive the extrusion, we need the attribute onto the primitive levels. So for that let's promote this CD point attribute onto the primitive for the extrusion to be used. Okay, for that let's add an attribute promote node in here, and let's connect this and onto the attribute promote. The original class is the point, the attribute is the CD, and let's promote this onto the primitives. And now if I middle mouse button, now we have one primitive attribute CD, which is good. Now let's add a poly extrude node in here, poly extrude, and let's connect this, and let's bring up the parameter of poly extrude node. And to actually use the CD to drive the extrusion, let's go into the local control, and here let's enable this local attribute, this Z scale attribute, and now it is expecting an attribute name Z scale. But if I middle mouse button, we do not have Z scale attribute, we have an ACD. So let's type in here CD, capital C, lowercase t, CD color diffuse. I want to use this attribute to drive my extrusion. Okay, and here you can see nothing has happened, and that is because this attribute value will going to be multiplied by this value. Okay, because this distance value is set to 0, everything is 0, so that no extrusion. Let's increase this to 1. Okay, and when I change this to 1, let me change this to, okay, why it's not happening? Maybe let's increase the amplitude. Okay, and now I can start to see some extrusion. I think the amplitude value was way low, but all of our geometry is being extruded at top. And to fix this, let's go into the poly extrude and let's go into the divide. It's at connected components. Let's change this to individual elements because I want the extrusion to be happen onto these individual primitives. Okay, and here as you can see, we have this extrusion going top as well as in the below zero as well. Okay, to fix this, let's dive inside the attribute warp. Let's click on this anti-alias noise and let's bring up its help to view what value it's actually outputting. And here onto the help, we have the amplitude parameter scale factor. The output range is between minus 0.5 to 0.5. Okay, now that we know the value of what it is outputting, I can add a fit range node in here to fit these values. Okay, and let's connect this in between, and onto the fit range I know that the source minimum is the minus 0.5. let's type minus 0.5 and the maximum value is 0.5. let's change this to 0.5 and we are remapping this to between 0 and 1. Okay, and now here as you can see, we do not have extrusion going below 0 and we have some clipping, and that is because we are using very high amplitude value. Let's go into the amplitude and let's lower this down to 1. Okay, I can maybe increase this more than 1 to add a bit more contrast. Okay, now I can adjust the offset, and here as you can see, I am using the noise map to drive my extrusion, and we can actually import our own map to drive our extrusion, and for that we can use a node called attribute from map. So let's add an attribute from map node in here, and for this let me duplicate this grid and let's create another example onto this side. That is my grid with the same all of these number of divisions 150. Okay, and onto the attribute from map, it is using an AT for UV map. Okay, and for the map I'm using the map that I have downloaded from website called Mixkit, and here I'm using the stock video footage and these are completely free to use. Let's select the full HD and let's download that, and I'm also using this, that is a grayscale video of woman adjusting its scarf. Okay, so let's select this full HD and let's download this video as well. And once the video has been downloaded, I have converted this video into JPEG sequences in After Effects. Let me show you. And here I have the sequences that I have converted into JPEG sequences. Because the MP4 video file format this node does not support. Let me go back onto Houdini attribute from map. I cannot use the MP4 file, so I have to convert the original MP4 video into these JPEG sequences. Okay, so now let's import these sequences into Houdini. Let's go into the attribute from map and let's pick our selection. Let's go into my C drive and Mixkit. Here I have the aerial view. Let's select the aerial view and we have these sequences. Okay, show sequences as one entry is checked on. Let's hit accept. Okay, that is my video, and this time I'm going to use the dual mesh for the extrusion, and for that we don't need that many division. We can change this to maybe default value, which was 10 by 10. Okay, and now let's add a remesh node in here to convert this geometry into hexagonal dual mesh. We need to convert our mesh into triangles. Okay, so let's add a remesh node in here Let's view the result. And by adding the remesh, here you can see that our remesh is creating our nice triangular mesh, which is good. And to actually convert this triangle into dual mesh, we can add a node called divide. Let's add this, and onto the divide node we have an option called compute tool. So let's click on it, and now here as you can see we have this nice hexagonal geometry that is called dual mesh. Okay, and we can control these divisions by the remesh node. If I go into the remesh, onto the size, if I lower this value, let's lower this size value to 0.1. now we have more triangles, which means now we will have more of these hexagonal mesh. Okay, and now I can add an attribute from map node, and now I am bringing my video sequences. If I hit play, here as you can see all of my sequences has been imported, which is good. Now let's adjust the grid size onto the grid. Let's make the size a bit bigger, 20 by 12 maybe, and let's view the result onto the attribute from map. Okay, so I think the video is inverted. We can go into the attribute from map, and we have some option in here. I can change the color space. Right now it's set to automatic. We can change this to linear to have the linear color space, and let's keep it at automatic. And we can also enable the remapping to add our bit more contrast. Okay, I can adjust the contrast roll off. I can add more or less contrast in here, and let me disable this. And I can also go into the image setting, and here I can invert my V as well as I can invert U. Okay, and let's invert this V, and that is correct orientation of my video sequence. Okay, and in here we also have the option for scaling our sequence, as well as I can rotate my sequence, as well as I can translate this, add an offset. And here as you can see at the end we have these streaking, and that is coming from the filter setting. If you go into the filter setting, we have the wrap option set to streak. I can change this to repeat. Now we have this repetition, or I can change this to decal, which means it will clip out when our sequence has been cut off. And let me change this to streak, and let's go into the image setting, and let's default out all of these values by right clicking, and let's change this to revert to default. And we have the shortcut in here. The shortcut is press and hold the control key on your keyboard and middle mouse button. So hover over to the parameter, press and hold the control key and middle mouse button. Now we can default these value very quickly. Okay, and in here we have the export attribute, and that is vector, which means it is importing RG and B color values. And if you want only grayscale value, I can change this to float. Now we do not have any color information, but we have a grayscale video. Okay, so I think grayscale value is good. And now attribute from map is creating an ACD point attribute. So let's promote this onto our primitive level. So let's add an attribute promote node in here, and let's connect this and promote this attribute onto primitive level from point to primitives. Now I can use poly extrude node, and let's connect this and onto the poly extrude. Let's change the divide into individual elements, and onto the local control let's enable our local attribute, and the attribute that I want to use is CD. And we also need to adjust the distance scale to introduce the extrusion. Okay, so now here as you can see at the high contrast value we have some extrusion. And for faster playback, let me go back onto the remesh node, and let's increase the size to 0.5 or maybe 0.4 let me keep loading this down. 0.3. Let's hit play. Okay, so here as you can see, our animation has been imported and extrusion is working. Let me make a high-res flipbook. Let's change this to 0.1. And maybe I can go into the attribute from map and let's change this to vector so that I can view my RGB colors as well. Okay, and let me hide the parameter, and let's also make this viewport a bit bigger, and let's adjust our camera angle, I think right about here. And let's create a quick flipbook preview. And to create a flipbook, let's come over here onto the flipbook and let's right click, and in here let's create a flipbook with new settings. Here we have these settings, and I like to go into the size and let's uncheck the resolution. It will use the 1280 and 720p as a resolution. If I uncheck this, now it will use my current window size. Okay, if I adjust my window size, viewport size, it will going to be adjust accordingly. And here as you can see, now we are choosing this size, which is this current viewport size, which is good. Okay, let me pick a quick angle. I think that is fine. Let's right click, so the size is fine, and let's create a few frame of flipbook. Let's start. Okay, so here I have created a flipbook of 189 frames. So let's view the result. Okay, here as you can see, we are driving the extrusion from our video, which is quite useful in creating motion graphics. Okay, and let me close the flipbook, and now let's bring up our another video that we also have downloaded. And for this, let me go back, and we have this one, woman adjusting the neck scarf. Hit accept, and there we have a video of woman adjusting its scarf. Okay, let me create a flipbook of this video clip as well. I think that is looking quite cool. So let's right click and let's start a new flipbook. Okay, so here I have created a flipbook of 143 frames. So let's hit play and view the result. Okay, and this video based extrusion I think is looking very cool. Okay, and I can continue increasing the if I decrease the size, remesh size, I can add more resolution into my extrusion. Okay, and that's how you can import the map to drive the extrusion, and that's how you can create a dual meshes. And dual mesh can work on any triangulated mesh. For example, if I create a test geometry pig head, and let's add this. Here we have a pig head, and if I want to convert this mesh topology into dual mesh, first I need to triangulate this mesh, and for that I'm going to use remesh node. Okay, and for faster working, maybe let's go into the geometry and let's change this to easy, or we can remove all of these shading attributes. And for that, let's add an attribute delete node in here, and let's connect this. And onto the attribute delete, let's click on this delete non-selected to remove all of these attributes. And now let's connect this into the remesh node, and the remesh node will generate a nice triangulated mesh for us. Let's lower down the size value to generate more of these triangles. Okay, now you can lay down a divide node in here, and let's connect this. View the result of the divide node, and onto the divide, let's enable the compute dual option to create our dual mesh. Okay, so that's how you can convert any of the topology or geometry into dual mesh.